how, if at all, has your view of Ayrton changed as you got to know him, making the movie?
Well, I have to say, I mean, I knew about the driver. I knew a bit about the driver. I didn't really know too much about the man away from the racing. I didn't know, the driver's briefings and all of that. And the more footage I saw of him, the more I came across him. They're not worried about the cameras when they're in a driver's briefing. This is all FOM cameramen. They're not journalists. So, and when he's in Imola, he's being himself. That camera's right there, but it's not someone he has to worry about. So he can be totally honest. The more I saw of him, the more I liked him. I think he's a genuine guy. I don't think he's faking it. I think he was this complex chap. He definitely was a tough guy on the track. But he really was the only one who spoke up in drivers' briefings. Nobody else would say a word. They just wanted to get out of there. And I've seen so many briefings that we didn't have time to show, where he'd be the only guy always arguing about safety, always arguing for other drivers. I tell you one 1989, just before they drive for the World Championship, when we first sort of introduced Jean-Marie Balest, the longer version of that scene, when Balest is saying, all of these people are watching you, I don't know why, they're a bit stupid, they think you're an example. The longer version is, he says, a couple of weeks before, young French driver, Lafrette, was it? Jacques Lafrette had a terrible accident and injured his legs, maybe career-threatening. And so Balest says, I want to raise some money for him, okay, because he may not be able to drive, so I want you to all give $1,000 each. And the teams will give $1,000, and I'll give $1,000, and we'll give that money to him and create a fund. And everyone's like, okay, fine, well, $1,000. Senna's like, no, what's he going to do with $1,000? That's nothing, What's he going to do with that? Listen, we will all give $10,000, every one of us, and whatever we give, the FIA double from all the fines you've taken off of us, and give that to him, because then at least that's some money. And Balest's like, no, it's not possible, I can't do this, it's not my money. They had this argument for ages. An hour or two before he's going to drive for the World Championship. Nobody else says a word. Cut a long story short, they then drive. In my opinion, Prost does turn into him. They get out of the car, Senna carries on, drives, gets disqualified, gets a 6-month suspended ban, and gets fined 100 grand. The next sentence, Balest says, and I'm going to give half this money to a fund that I have created for this French driver. So instead of getting a grand out of Senna, he takes 50 grand out of him and gives it to the fund that he created. I mean, you just can't make it up, And we just didn't have time. There's another 5 minutes of that scene.
When I was growing up, and I was a real big fan, that's the idea I got of him, and I used to get taken the mick out of at school because everyone liked Nigel Mansell. So just thank you, first of all. And I just wondered, what reaction did you get from Senna's family when they first watched the film? Bruno,
his nephew, was racing Formula 1 last year, and he was at the Monaco Grand Prix. Bruno's the boy driving the boat, the speedboat. That's Bruno Senna. So the family flew over from Sao Paulo to see the film, to see the race, and we thought we'd show them the film. And it was very, very emotional, because we hired a cinema in the middle of the afternoon during Cannes, and there were about 12 members of the family there, and even when he's winning titles, you could hear the sobs in the darkness, so it was a pretty heavy experience for everyone, because there's so much footage in the film which the family have never seen. And I think particularly Imola, I don't know if they'd ever seen him looking so unhappy during that final weekend. But at the ending, Viviani stood up, in floods of tears, and hugged us all and just said, you've got the right balance of the genius on the track and the humanity of the man off the track, and they were happy. And so we were happy, because that was obviously a very nerve-wracking experience. At some point we're going to have to show the whole film to the family. Bianca, Senna's niece, had seen sections, but pretty much we just were working away in London while they were in Brazil, waiting for it to be completed. And so,
you mentioned structure of the film, and I assumed before we came in you'd start with the accident. And having seen the film, I understand why you did it, the way you did it.
Yeah.
But why not stop there? What caused you to go on and show the funeral and so forth? Why was the sort of pinnacle not the accident and his death? Why carry on after that?
What he meant to Brazil was vital to the story. That is his legacy is also important, but he affected an entire nation. Brazil stopped for 3 days of mourning. It was a huge thing. This is long before Diana. And so it was a key part of the story of him going home in a way. Brazil meant so much to him that it was important for the film to work for him to return home. And in a way, all of the images that you've seen of the flag and what the flag meant to him being suddenly draped over the coffin, and a lot of the themes, a lot of the images that you see at the beginning of when he wins his 3rd World Championship, and he, you know, he comes through and everyone's waving from the buildings, and the sadness of returning home and everyone's crying from the buildings. So it was a very important thing for us to take him back and to see the funeral and to see how the scale of his fame in a way. And to not start to film the funeral, we did. There was a cut that did start with the funeral, not the accident, but the funeral, for a while, because we had the feeling, well, what if you don't know much about him, and you don't know, and you're watching two different films? But actually, the film was a movie about his life, not just a film about his death. So we didn't want to start with the death. That was the reason.
So you cut a lot from the film. Is there anything you were really upset you had to cut out that you wish you could have left in?
Loads. Yeah, I mean, there's a few scenes that I suppose that come to mind. There was a version that used to start with, before you cut to him in the go-kart footage, there was a section which just set up the state of Brazil at that point in time, a military dictatorship. It was in a really bad way, a lot of violence, a lot of people being beaten up, and it was just really an absolute mess. And then we cut to this boy with someone holding a bit of cardboard with Brazil handwritten on it, and you're thinking, what, that country's a mess and this guy's going to save them? And I quite like that version, because you're expecting, you know, this film to be about racing, you're going to start hard with some racing, and actually it was something different. That was one version that we had. There was a scene about Tamborello, which used to come just before the race, which was Gerhard Berger talking about this moment when Senna and Berger went to the corner, because Berger had a very bad accident in '89 there, where his car was up in flames. And there was a conversation where they said, if they don't change this corner, someone's going to die here. It's a pretty powerful scene, and we had footage from Italian TV about a month before Imola, where you could see that Senna was obviously not happy with the corner being bumpy. And that was, again, a really pretty powerful scene that used to set up Imola. We took it out for various reasons. There were a few scenes that we had that were setting up what was to come. We took it out because it's easy now in hindsight to look at everything and find a meaning and say, oh, look what's going to happen. We all know what's going to happen. Look, look, look. And actually, how many corners would Senna have stood on and said, I'm not happy with this corner? How many corners in the world would he have gone on and said, I don't think this surface is flat enough? You know, we could have picked and chosen anywhere, any track. But because we know what happens, we will show Tamborello. So in reality, nobody expected that accident to happen. It was an absolute shock to everyone. Everyone thought he was going to win every single race that year. You know, he was the best driver and the best car, and it was a shock when you realise he didn't even finish a race in the Williams. So we took it out because we could do a very different film if we looked at everything in hindsight. But actually at the time, the idea was just, he's under pressure. Why hasn't he won the first race? Why didn't he win the second race? Is he worried? He's worried about the Benetton. There's something not right with the Benetton. How is Schumacher beating him every time off the you know, when he's on pole and somehow Schumacher always gets to the first corner. So we ended up going with what it was like at the moment rather than telling the story in hindsight, if that makes sense. And there were a few scenes like that. I mean, the cut from 2 hours down to 100 minutes was really hard. There was this thing, I don't know if you guys know, when he was in Lotus. One character I really wanted to try to set up earlier was Professor Sid Watkins. We love Sid Watkins, he's just such a wonderful guy, the doctor. And he and Senna really were close, and they met very, very early on. In fact, when he was in a Tolman, and he wasn't strong enough to drive that car, the very first time Senna finished the race, it was the second race for Tolman, he finished the race, he ends up in hospital. And he's in a neck brace. And it's like the first time he drives the car, he ends up in hospital in a neck brace. But TV Globo, being TV Globo, breaks into the hospital and still interviews him in a hospital bed. How did you do? How did it go? And he's like, I can't talk, man, I'm really in pain. And it's unbearable in one way when you know what's going to happen. In another way, it was very funny to see this is the kind of movie we're making, access all areas. And it was Sid that kind of helped him right from the beginning, but we could never find any footage of the two of them together when Senna was young. And then when he got to Lotus, he got Bell's palsy, and he couldn't blink, he couldn't close one of his eyes, so he nearly lost his Lotus drive. And it was Prof. Sid Watkins that gave him the steroids that, again, fixed him, that gave him the chance to drive for Lotus. So Sid Watkins played a huge part in his life, but we just could never find the visuals to tell the story earlier on, so Sid comes in quite late on. So there's just amazing footage that we saw, but it was just, we had to make some tough decisions along the way, the whole way of just losing the scenes that we loved.